Let's start the webinar.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, I guess we will go ahead and get started. For anyone who doesn't know, my name is Andrea Carter. I played basketball at the University of Tennessee from 2012 to 2016, and I am now a women's basketball analyst, sideline reporter, co-host, just kind of a Swiss Army knife for ESPN. I've been with the company for 4 years now, but still very close, very connected, and very tied to the University of Tennessee. I try very hard not to be biased, and I graduated from the College of Communication and Information. So we'll see if we get a few more attendees coming in, and then we'll get started. I'll introduce our panelists and guests, and then we'll get going. Probably give it about a minute. Perfect. All right, I got the all good sign. So again, I'm Andrea Carter, very happy to be here. We have 4 incredible guests. I'll introduce them and just let them say hi. And then we'll kind of jump right into it. I'll let all of them explain more about their roles and what they do, but all of them very connected to NIL and will be very, very helpful for students that want to work in NIL or be involved with NIL in any capacity. Our panelists are amazing. Before we start, I want to thank the Communication Studies Club in the College of Communication and Information. They are the ones that put this entire thing together for us. So we are appreciative of all the students in the Communication Studies Club. We'll get to our guests. First one I'll introduce is Kat Jones. So Kat joined the Tennessee Athletics staff in September of 2021 in a newly created position of Director of Name, Image, and Likeness. So a position that was not there before, created specifically for NIL. So Kat, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Super excited.
Next, we'll have Celine Mangan. She is a senior account executive, which sounds extremely important, for Altius Sports Partners. Celine oversees client relationships and serves as an advisory capacity in the evolving landscape of NIL. Celine, thank you for coming with us.
Thanks, Andrea. And that really made it sound very legit. So I appreciate that warm welcome. Thank you all for being here.
It is so legit. Luke Bibby is with us. He's a freshman cheerleader at the University of Tennessee, studying management and entrepreneurship at the Haslam College of Business. I remember having a lot of friends at the Haslam College of Business that look stressed out all the time because of the tough classes. So Luke, shout out to you for being an athlete and in Haslam. We appreciate you for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Absolutely. And the last one, introducing Brittany Williams. She is the co-owner and co-founder of Bridge Management Group, which provides everything you never knew you needed to navigate the world of NIL as a college athlete and beyond being a college athlete. Brittany, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all so much. It's a true honor to be invited.
Awesome. So first question, I think this one's important, and I would like all of you to go. We can go in reverse order. So we'll go Brittany first, then Luke, then Celine, then Kat. What does NIL stand for? I think we know it's name, image, and likeness, but if it means something else to you, what does it stand for and what does it mean to each of you?
Sure. Obviously, name, image, likeness, and its true authenticity of the word is simply the athlete getting to be themselves now and getting to essentially, let's call it what it is, make money from that. I think we've tried to put a lot of fancy words around it, and some of that has gotten lost in the mix of what is this. And it's truly branding yourself on who you are on and off the field, court, course, whatever that may be. But what brand do you want to build around yourself? And these athletes now are getting a 4, 5, 6 year head start on that now, that all of us maybe that participated in athletics pre-NIL had to start post-graduation. So I think it is truly, for me, when I look at NIL and I look at the kids that we manage and the athletes and the amazing humans we get to be a part of their lives, it truly means opportunity. And it means an opportunity to build their business and their brand well before any of us got the opportunity to.
Got it. Nice. Brittany, will you share too what you specifically do in NIL? I think that would be important. What do you do with it? And then others as well.
Sure. So Bridge Management Group, we represent individual athletes. So my partner, Peyton Baxter, she was a cheerleader at the University of Tennessee, and also my sister, we own Bridge Management Group together. Peyton is a full-time influencer and I am her brand manager. And so we truly are living, breathing in this social media space, truly in the public image, social marketing area. So once NIL came about, we saw the need and necessity for a service to student athletes that possibly help them navigate. We joke with our athletes, you're coming into our world. Let us introduce you to it. So whether they want to be called influencers or not, now they get to be the title of monetary public figures. So what we have done is we have created a space and a company that can mentor and lead these athletes and essentially take the third job that they were being handed between being a student first and an athlete second, and then managing their own brand. We are helping them take that third arm out of the race of their own and helping manage their contracts, their negotiations, and everything that may come with the business end of NIL. We represent them. We are licensed agents through the state of Tennessee. So we represent each individual athlete. So we work for them.
Nice. That's awesome. Luke, I know I said you were going to go second, but I think I want you to go at the end because you have an extremely unique perspective as a student athlete. So we'll skip you for now. We'll go Celine and then Kat, if you have, what does NIL mean to you and what do you do with it in your role?
Yeah, thanks. Similar to Brittany, I think the biggest thing at Altia, so we are advisors. We don't like the word consultant. We're advisors top down with athletic departments across the country. So we work with 20 Power 5 schools across the country, all the way from an athletic director to coaches to CAT to student athletes to even a parent or guardian, and even donors and development of how to enter the space and how to maximize that space, but all in the right way. We say that we believe in empowerment, but empowerment through education. So to me, truthfully, I believe with Brittany, what she said is that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to create a playing field that's never been able, whether all of us as former student athletes on the call or as current student athletes, but also the people that have just never had this chance to capitalize on who they are and be their authentic self. And whether or not they want to do it is up to them, but just truly taking advantage of it, how they best see it fit in their life.
Kat?
I'll take it away. And I mean, just to piggyback off what these two amazing ladies have already said, and to shout out to them because they have to deal with me all the time, and they are fantastic at it. But yeah, when I think about NIL, especially as I talk to our student athletes, I always kind of start with NIL's you. I mean, it really is, because it's your name, your image, your likeness. But then as you dig deeper into it, it really is what you want it to be. So I really stress to them, it can be whatever they want. And that's what's so cool about it, so special about it. It's never going to look the same for each student athlete. You can't just plug someone into some model, because that's really not what this is all about. It really is about who they want to be, the brand they want to represent, their why behind it. And that's why I think it's just so cool. It's a great space where they can really make it whatever they want it to be. So the thing I always say is NIL is you. My role, love to hit on it. It's probably the number one question I always get. I view myself as kind of the point person for NIL, both with our internal stakeholders in the athletic department and our external stakeholders outside the athletic department. So I get to work with our student athletes, our coaches, our staff, our administration, because one of the other awesome parts about NIL is there's nobody safe from it, I say too. It's affecting everybody, which means I kind of get to work with everybody, answer their questions, serve as that resource, serve as that educational resource. And same with our external stakeholders, our fantastic agents, our donors, our fans, our businesses that want to get involved, really be there and help them navigate this as well. It's the first time anyone's jumped into it with collegiate athletes. So to really kind of help them along. And Brittany, I love what you say, because I say this all the time on calling it a third job. I tell our student athletes, they almost double major. They major in academics and they major in athletics. And then we added a third job on top in NIL. So I love the way you put it. That's exactly how I put it as well.
No, it's all so special. And I love that there are people to help the athletes, because I know that, and Luke, you can obviously speak to this. What has NIL, what has it meant to you, Luke? How has it changed your perspective of being a college athlete? And also, how much help have you had, or how important has help been as you navigate this space?
Definitely. So kind of like Kat was saying, I definitely feel like it kind of opens a whole new variety of doors for all student athletes. You know, it's the platform and story that you want to tell based on who you want to be. So I kind of was hesitant at first to really get involved with NIL just because I didn't really feel like I had a social media presence, and kind of jumping on board with that with Bridge Management Group. That's kind of where all of my support and guidance has come from. And I'm so thankful for Brittany and Peyton. And I really do feel like it's so important to have guidance into this world that I felt like I had no clue what I was doing. So kind of just like opening these doors and guiding me throughout the safest and most effective way to kind of get my name out there and build my brand has been so, so vital into my success so far.
Yeah, I know that's been huge. And I think it's great, Luke, the humility that you bring to the panel, saying you didn't have a good social media presence. But for those that don't know, Luke is a Knoxville native, graduated from Webb School of Knoxville, finished in the cheerleading world in the top 10 twice, racked up 4 summit appearances, and appeared in the NCAA Winners Circle. Last one, he was also selected as a 2020 and 2021 varsity feature model. So not trying to make you blush, Luke, but you bring a lot to the table as a student athlete. I think it's amazing just what all you've done already, and just, you're a freshman in college and so much ahead of you. I want to get into, and this is more for, I guess, Brittany, Celine, and Kat, when it comes to just starting off. You already said you work with the athletes, you work with agents, you work with internal and external stakeholders, but there's no current NCAA guidance overall. So, Kat, we'll go back to you on this one. If there's no NCAA guidance, how do you navigate this space? How do you know what to do, or even where to start?
Yes, that was a great question. So yeah, we've got a little bit of an interim policy, but obviously not a huge amount of guidance coming from that NCAA policy, kind of the bare minimum of no pay for play, no inducement, and what I don't like to use the word sham, but you have to actually do something is how I describe it. You have to do something for your NIL money. So where we then fell back onto was we do have a Tennessee state law that went into effect on January 1st. So that's kind of our big one of, hey, we can't break that, right? It is a law. It's got, that's a pretty big one. So that's really got to be our guiding force, is that NCAA interim policy and the Tennessee state law. From there, we've sculpted a policy and procedure, obviously internally here at UT that follows those. So it is a lot of basically questions coming up for the first time, even in areas that are well established. It's now, where does NIL fit in? How does NIL fit in? So it's a team effort. It is not some magical thing where we kind of have one person who gets to come up with the answers. It's really a team effort of who's involved. I'm constantly leaning on all of my teammates here in the UT athletic department to make sure I see every single side of it before we do answer those questions for the first time. But it's the number one challenge for sure. Not just not having a lot of guidance, but then the range of guidance across the country. Everyone's operating either under a different state law or no state law. So it is by far the biggest challenge. It also maybe is what makes it a little fun. I don't know about fun if it's the right word, but we probably use chaos more than fun. But we're all approaching this for the first time and just trying to make sure at the end of the day that we want to protect our student athletes, but also maximize their opportunities. Oh, I think you might still be on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot to take in and to process. Both Celine and Brittany smile big. Brittany, I'll go back to you because we haven't heard from you in a while. I mean, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that there's no NCAA guidance, and how do you all navigate this space at Bridge Management Group?
So we call Kat. No, I'm just kidding, but not kidding. So we met with Kat the week we launched our business, and we're big believers in doing things the right way. And if there's a rule, we're going to follow it to the T. And if there's not a rule, we're going to have fun with it and see what we can do to make sure we're getting the best deals for our athletes. But when it comes down to it, if we are even think it might be in the gray area, our number one job for our business is to protect our athletes first and foremost, to protect them financially, to protect their eligibility, to protect them mentally, whatever we need to do with them. We joke they get two mamas, whether they like it or not. So our job is to protect our athletes. So if we think for anything's in the gray area, we are reaching out to attorneys. We have attorney on retainer. We reach out to CAT, whatever resource we need for them. We feel like that is our job. When they sign on with us, they are leaning into us to make sure we can protect them and their eligibility first and foremost. I mean, it might sound very simplistic, but if you mess that up, it's all the bricks come crumbling. I know we don't use bricks anymore around here, but so anyway, that's basically what we do. Is we lean heavily on attorney and we lean heavily on our experience. Luckily, Peyton and I are very versed in this world, not necessarily the NIL rules or the Wild West as we have deemed it, but in the social media world. So when we're speaking with brands or we're speaking with people and that's the other kind of side of this that maybe people don't talk about as much, is companies and brands are also entering this world for the first time if they don't work with influencers or things of that sort, or ambassadors a lot already. So we are essentially the middleman where we deal with Peyton's business and her brand with companies that deal with influencers and social media marketing on the regular. Now with these athletes and dealing with some of the more local brands, we're also helping educate them on what does NIL mean? And what does this mean for you as a company? And what exposure can you gain? Because athletes are a very special target when it comes to this. Social media, so often we hear follower count, comment count, interactions. What are your views? What are your story views? What are your impressions? But athletes are different because they may have 2,000 followers with a blue check mark and on TV every night. So their influence is so much bigger and outside of a number count of social media that world has come to rely on very heavily. So we're helping educate the businesses as well on this world of NIL, because again, there are no rules, very few rules, as Kat said, but what are the businesses needing to learn, because there isn't a playbook for them as well. So leaning on to those resources, but also leaning on to our experience to help get the businesses to understand why they need to get in the game too.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Celine, for you, I know that you had a big smile on your face when I talked about how do you navigate this space? Is there anything at Altius that you all do to either keep up with news as it's changing, keep up with things as it's changing, or is it more like when things come in, you figure out what's specific to that situation?
Yeah, that's a good way of framing it. I would say a little bit of both. So part of our reason is we have a whole state by state legislation map, then we have a federal legislation thing. Then we look at where are the different cases and the litigation out there, but then also how does that apply to not only the different states we're working with, but the different schools and the student athletes at those schools. So it's a combination of almost all of this coming together to both Kat and Brittany's point is there is no guardrails right now. Well, there is, but very minimally, but there's no federal landscape, there's no national rules. And so there is so much chaos and confusion without lack of communication. So part of what our role is how do we take the content and the knowledge and transfer it to the right people and make sure that everyone has the right messaging, right? To the question in the chat, I mean, it's a great one. The concept of use of IP and teaching student athletes about intellectual property and copyright issues, that's something seemingly so small, but it's so important because every state has a different guideline for it. Every school has a different policy on it. So how do we create not only the education and messaging for that, but also how to create the supplemental resources so that student athletes can maximize on it, but do everything in the right way, because it's going to happen. It's a new landscape for everyone. So just continuing to be proactive is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Kat, I want to ask you a specific question because I feel like, some of our viewers might not know. When you're talking about state legislation and the laws of that state in regards to NIL, it only applies to the state that the student is in school in. Is that right? Or does the student, I was from Georgia, but I went to Tennessee, is it Georgia and Tennessee? Or can you explain that for some of our viewers?
That's a great question. I might lean on Celine a little bit. At this time, it's being applied to the state that you are in school in. It is a question that's kind of been almost up for debate, of almost like a choice of law, where you're gonna, what's gonna kind of control you. It's one that I don't think we might have an answer to unless it comes maybe to, to head, unless someone, really dives in on it with a court or something. But it's definitely a question that came up. But right now we're operating in a state in which the institution's in. So I have to follow Tennessee state law and make sure that UT is following Tennessee state law. And then all of our student athletes are under that law as well. It's definitely a question for debate. Celine, you got anything to add to that?
No, I mean, Kat's exactly right. Not the problem. The challenge comes is because most of these NIL laws may not prohibit, right? So they're a double negative of saying the University of Tennessee may not prohibit a student athlete's ability to make money. So when that double negative comes into play, it's the question for the legal people on the call. It becomes into play of where are we following it and who? So it really is right now, as Kat mentioned, that's all of it. The other thing is even you start to think about transfers. Or right now we're starting high school graduates and they're committed and they sign their letters of intent, all of those things. So how does it all play? The honest fact of it is that it's going to be different case by case, and every single different situation has a new layer. And that's a lot of what the work we're doing with some of the different schools too.
Yeah. Luke, I want to get you involved, obviously, with your extremely unique perspective. I know in the beginning you said you were a little hesitant early to get involved with NIL as it was all so new. And we're still hearing from our other three great panelists how new everything still is and how there aren't guidelines. And I know you said you started working with Bridge Management, but what was it either about Bridge Management or about NIL or just about your internal feelings that made you want to get involved with NIL? When did that flip? When did that switch flip for you?
So for me, it kind of started as soon as I decided to come to Tennessee to cheer. I knew that the whole NIL deal was kind of rolling out, and I had talked to the dean of the Haslam College of Business, and he kind of got it on my radar of kind of getting into the footsteps of it, like a guinea pig program. So I really wanted to take advantage early on of, the opportunities that were going to arise from something that there wasn't really a groundwork laid yet, and we could kind of shape it to be what we wanted it to be. So my mom and I decided we really wanted to dive into the NIL deal thing. And so we didn't really know which direction to go, but we knew Brittany and Peyton both obviously are experts in this field. So we turned to them first. They have been great leaders for me to kind of develop my platform. It's, a little more unique because I didn't have a huge platform going into it. So they just reassured me, there's a story for everyone. The platform that you develop is kind of specific and individualized for you. So I think like for people on the call that are really interested in getting into NIL, don't let that be the reason to hold you back. And for me, I feel like that was my biggest reservation going into it, not having a platform originally.
Yeah. And what was the experience like, Luke, for you, say when you first started working with Brittany, and you don't have to get into great detail, but what made you comfortable enough to trust them? Like, did they ask your interest? Did you get to give that information to them? Just talk about that process.
For sure. So I have known Brittany and Peyton since I was about 10 years old. So I knew going into it that these were two very awesome ladies, so I could trust with pretty much everything. So they really have become two of my second moms. There's not a day where I don't have a text from one of them on my phone, which is a blessing in disguise because I know they're always on me to perform to my best ability too. But we sat down, kind of went through my interests, what I wanted my story to be, and kind of the direction we were going to choose to go there. So I feel like having that kind of laid out in front of me to I guess meet an end goal was super, super supportive, but also at the same time, I knew that I would have guidance the entire time.
Yeah, for sure.
And
the
biggest thing from Peyton and Brittany was they reassured me that they were not going to let me do anything that Peyton wasn't going to feel comfortable signing as well. So that was kind of a little bit of comfort for me, not being super familiar with the industry, knowing that I was in good hands with both of them. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important too, Brittany and Celine, both of you, since you work with pretty much everyone, is there anything that you two do? Is it finding athletes? Is it finding brands? Is it, where does it start when you get an athlete and you work with them? Are you just reaching out to any brand that you think would work? Brittany, we'll start with you. How does that work?
Sure. So we have 10, as of today, 11 athletes on roster with us, and we have everything from starting football players to women's soccer to a professional LPGA tour golfer to guy and girl cheerleader, We have two men's basketball players. So we have a baseball player, trying to make sure we catch everybody on there. But our roster is very diverse on purpose. We wanted to make sure that we were a representation of how we feel about sports, making sure that everyone had a place to call home, essentially. So what we do is each of our initial conversations with someone. Now, we have been on the phone with some people's mamas. We have been on the phone with some people's grandmamas. We have been on the phone with some people that we never talked to their family. We have met face to face with some people to go over contract and game plan. So it just very much, we tailor everything we do to that athlete. And like Luke said, one of our first questions is, who are you? What brands do you already use every day? If I came over and I went through your dorm or I went through your apartment, what do you use? Our biggest thing about any sort of social media, and Peyton does this in her own brand as well, is authenticity. If you lose your authenticity with your audience, you're done. And it really doesn't matter how many followers you have or anything of that sort. If you are authentic in your social media presence, it doesn't matter what the paycheck is, because the one-off paycheck will not pay the big picture loss if you are not authentic. So that is the message we really try to let them know, is we say no a lot. We have brands come to our athletes very, very often, and it doesn't always match who they want to be or the brand they're portraying. So one of the first questions I always ask, especially the athletes with that age range and that market, is, if I took you to the gas station, what snack and drink are you buying? Because sometimes it's an interesting answer, because one of our athletes, he's like, I love Welch's, fruit snacks. I'm like, you like what? It just wasn't what I expected. So I just reached out to Welch's. We haven't heard back yet, but I did reach out to him for him. And then it was, one of our athletes is from up north, and he's like, I love sweet tea. Like, I just love sweet tea. Well, I'm born and raised in Knoxville. For someone to be that passionate about just aha moment of sweet tea was an eye opener to me, of like, hey, that's a story we can tell. Everyone likes a backstory. So we really want to make sure that we are pushing them in the path in which is authentic to who they are. So we very much grill them when we first talk to them or we first sign them on about, what brands do you use? What brands do you want to use? Who's your dream brand to work with? That is one of the questions we ask everyone. And then we go out and try to get it for them. We might not get it the first week, but we don't stop. We're a little bit relentless when it comes to our athletes.
Relentless. I think a relentless mindset as an athlete and as someone that works for athletes is extremely important. I know I want my agent all the time to be as relentless as possible. And he's like, I'm doing the best I can. I'm like, I love you. You're great. Celine, for you, I can imagine the process at Altius being similar, right? Getting to know the athletes and what they want. Is there anything unique that Altius does? And then also, just to, piggyback off of that, I know you're the senior account executive, but what are maybe some other roles in Altius that some students participating could potentially think about or imagine having one day working in this field?
Did you know that we had 4 open positions? Is that why you asked that? I appreciate this.
You know what? I'm going to say that I did my research and found that out, but maybe it's just intuition.
Oh, sweet. I'll answer that in a second. But yeah, so I think it's important to know we're not agents. Our CEO came from the NFL Players Association, and we love people like Brittany and working with people like Brittany. We do not want to be agents. Part of that reason is if we're getting paid by the school, we didn't want to have biased opinions. And if we're educating, we wanted to be completely unbiased in it. So we work a lot with student athletes on what is their brand? Do you want it to be? What could it look like? But also just thinking about a big picture. What does it look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And how does your coach feel about that? How do your administrators feel about it? Philosophically, making sure everything aligns, just because we're more so focused on the big picture rather than going out and getting student athletes deals, because we like to keep that separate. On the second question, so I'm a senior account executive. We have 20 plus schools. I mentioned we started a year and a half ago. I'm about a year in. We had 3 schools at that moment. So we are continuing growing. So for anyone on the call, we have account executives, we have legal interns that really work. They stay up to date on all those legislation trackings that we were talking about. We have a client coordinator, our COO, a VP of collegiate partnerships. Really holistically though, we're focused on how do we fulfill the needs of athletic departments as a whole, right? If our clients are the athletic departments, Every AD has a different need based on their own philosophy. Every coach and how they want to take it into recruiting, even though it can't be used as a recruiting inducement. How does that work? And so what with our staff is how do we fulfill each of those roles as we continue to grow?
And, you know, Celine, you said something that you talked about what the athletes and what it would look like in 5 to 10 years. Kat, I'm going to come to you because, you know, you worked at UCF, you're at University of Tennessee, so you've been in college athletics. When you picture 5 to 10 years and just the growing and changing landscape of NIL, how do you expect college sports to change in the next 5 to 10 years?
Once again, a great question that if I had all the answers to, I'd say I'd probably be a lot better at my job. No, I think this does change it. We're in the midst of this kind of almost, you know, you're seeing an entire climate change with college athletics. For the better, in my opinion. There's, you know, people want to debate that, but I do think you're seeing us headed in the right direction. We do need to make sure we're doing it the right way. So it is, you know, it's thoughtful and purposeful changes that means that they're going to be long lasting. And even as we approach every single, you know, policy decision making with NIL internally here, that's in the back of our head. How is this going to withstand? Will this live up in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Like, are we thinking about this not just to solve the one issue in front of us right now, but is this going to last and set us up for success 3, 5, 10 years down the road? One of them being here at UT, we set up an actual course, like a 4-credit class, which I hope some of the people from the class are on the call right now. But that was one of the huge things we were passionate about here because we wanted to really set up something that could sustain and last and wouldn't just be a quick Band-Aid on NIL. I think the entire, the climate, the culture, whatever you want to call it with college athletics is changing. And it's another thing that I think is a great career lesson, life lesson, to just be ready for those changes. You can't predict it. You know, I in my wildest dreams didn't see a 9-0 Supreme Court decision coming down. So that's when I stopped predicting anything because I was like, well, I shouldn't bet on this because I'm going to be wrong. So that's when I learned really like things are going to happen. You can't control it all, but you can control how you react, which means you need to be ready to change when you need to change. But then always keep in the back of your head, what's going to last, what's going to serve our student athletes best. So I think it's one you can't try to predict it. You'll drive yourself crazy, but be prepared to be flexible and change. But then at the end of the day, we say this in our NIL class. And when I say it to student athletes, know your why. Same thing with an athletic department. What's our why? Why are we actually here? Why do we each wake up and grind and do all of this work? So keeping that why true, but then also being flexible. So, but yeah, as far as predicting, I stopped doing that because I'm bad at it.
Same. My March Madness bracket is wrong all the time. Every year it's wrong. I get paid to be an analyst in sports, and my bracket is absolutely wrong every single year. So predicting is there's just no good in it. Luke, I want to come to you on this one because, you know, when it comes to promoting yourself and promoting your name, image, and likeness, what are some important skills or connections that you have found that work for you? And sometimes it's awkward to promote yourself. How have you been able to do that?
Definitely. So I guess that's probably one of my biggest reservations as well, just promoting myself, that I wasn't really sure how to do it in the first place. And so I guess just being my own biggest advocate and knowing that what I put into is what I'm going to get out of it. And so I knew that kind of going into it, that some of it would be a little rocky at the beginning. But other than that, I guess Peyton and Brittany, like I said, being my biggest advocates and helping me kind of navigate the kind of building a platform and starting from the ground up of what direction we could go from there.
Brittany, and you know, obviously since you work with Luke and student athletes directly on getting them out there, from your perspective, what are you hearing from brands or companies as far as what they're looking for, or local businesses? Is it different when you go from a national brand to a local business? Just can you give some information on what they're looking for?
Sure. So I do want to piggyback a minute on what you said before, because one of the things that we have found with our athletes is they will not toot their own horn, for lack of a better word. You can read their resume to them all day long and they're like, no, 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 no. And I'm like, whoa, 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 you have to like put yourself out there. So one of the biggest things that we have found is when we are the ones essentially pitching them sometimes, and we are able to talk money, just if there are any athletes on this call or anyone into the NIL space, this is also with like people, if you're doing any sort of influencing or any sort of public figure, even if you create a ghost email, this is just a little tip, create a ghost email that even if you are the one talking your own money, someone thinks it's someone else because you don't want to tell your fans what you're going to charge them to go do something. So it's just a little tidbit there for free. But so as an agency, they don't ever have to talk money with anyone. We handle all of that for them. So we feel like that helps them be able to promote themselves more because they can truly focus on who they are as a brand without attaching dollar signs to it or monetary amounts to it when they are trying to promote themselves. But then to hop back on when we're talking to businesses, so we are able to make sure the businesses truly understand who they are and what they are. Because sometimes when you're talking to a national brand, which we've been working with some, we've had to truly educate them on, listen, you might not be into the SEC basketball world, but let me tell you about our athletes that are doing A, B, and C. Our town is in love with them. The country is falling in love with them. Let me tell you a little bit of the backstory. Here's some links to some newspaper articles that have been sent, because the national brands, a lot of the times those marketing execs, if it's not a sports brand, don't really follow sports. So they don't understand. They're like, oh, they only have 10,000 followers. I'm like, they have 10,000 eyeballs on them right this second because they're on TV. You know, they have 10 million eyeballs on them right now because they're getting ready to go into tournament play. So we're trying to really, again, educate those brands into the sports world. And then when we go into local businesses, obviously, they think they've hung the moon. So they are local heroes and they truly understand. And it's almost the opposite of those. So you have somebody emailing us, can, athlete A come to my daughter's birthday party tomorrow at 2? And they're like, I just was told to ask you and you could make it happen, which is great. And we want to make that happen. And that is a service we try to offer. But unfortunately, 99% of the time, the local people only see them as like the athlete heroes, and they don't quite understand the underbelly, is what we call it, of college athletics, that they are practicing 99% of the time, not just when there's a game on or when there's a, something that's public in the public eye. So those are kind of the challenges we're seeing on each side of the national brands versus the local brands and asks for our athletes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Celine, for you, I'm curious, and Kat, you could probably play to this one too, but when it comes to educating, if it's parents or the athletes or everyone that you work with, how do you navigate communicating with everyone and making sure everyone is receiving the information and no one is left out that's either surrounding this athlete or that this athlete is connected to? Like, how do you make sure that there are no loose ends when dealing with an athlete and NIL?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said we'd had it all figured out. But what I will tell you is that we believe in in-person communication and in-person interaction, whether that's via Zoom or actually in person. There's modules out there and we have resources like that, or we have one-pagers but I'm a firm believer. I actually was an education and communications major back in my undergrad. And I firmly believe everyone learns differently, but you can best learn through conversation and interactive discussion. So we also believe that, Andrea, like as a former student athlete, I say, okay, if they're interacting with 5 people, their athletic trainer, their coach, their assistant coach, maybe their academic tutor, and maybe their sport administrator, how are we giving all 5 of those people the same information so that if a student athlete goes to a different person, they're getting the same answer or they're getting the same feedback? I'll tell you that it looks different though on every single one of our campuses, and Kat can talk specifically about Tennessee. But the biggest part is if you take a concept of communication, how do you make sure it trickles down to every single one of those? And it's different mediums, it's different interactions, and it's different tries, and it's trial and error, a lot of it, right? Tax education is a great example of that. But figuring out how it works, because everyone learns differently, is the biggest takeaway of all of it.
Yeah,
Kat, is there anything? Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
I'll start with trial and error. 100%. I've had to, you kind of almost humble yourself. You'll be like, oh, this is a great idea. This is going to work so good. They're going to eat this up. And maybe that idea flops. And you got to be like, okay, let's start over. Some things, we're doing QR codes and graphics and one-sheeters. I do think in person, I agree. If I can get a student athlete in my office, then we can chat through every single thing. And that's when I feel the most confident. Also, making myself as available to every single person who is playing in this space. I'll use Brittany since she's on the call and we've chatted, making sure they feel like they can call me, making sure our parents feel like they can call me, our fans, our donors, they feel like they can call me. And then of course our student athletes and coaches, I plaster that. I have a QR code with my phone number, my email, plaster it everywhere. Cause I'm like, text me, call me. Otherwise I can't answer the question you don't ask me. But you do have to be flexible, figure out what works. Not everything is going to work every time. I definitely learned that one. There's been ones that I think is a slam dunk that doesn't work. And every now and then when I'm like, hey, this might work, let's throw it up as a resource, and they eat it up. Love meeting with our teams, even just popping in 5 minutes. Hey guys, just a reminder, here I am. That usually, oh yeah, like I got to go see Kat about that or ask this question. Those are huge successes, and they sound like small things for people maybe not in the space every day, but making sure the student athlete knows right away who to go to with the question is a win. And if they don't remember to go to me, making sure the people they trust to go to have the right information.
Yeah, and that's, Kat, you made a great point. I should have said that. It all starts with trust, and trust through communication and time. If they don't trust whoever they're getting the information from, they're not going to go to them to start to ask those questions. So it's intentionally spending that time with them and or their coaches and or the people that surrounds them so that they are not afraid to ask the question, because it's so unknown and such a new landscape.
Coming to you, Brittany, with this one, it was in the chat actually, and I think this is a great question. What analytical tools are used within NIL in measuring progress, using predictive analytics for decision making? How do you keep track of whether or not the athletes that you represent are experiencing success through their NIL deals?
So a lot of those analytics that we use are the traditional social media analytics, because that is what the brands will ask for. So they're going to ask for, if we're working a deal with Instagram stories, and that's the brand's deliverable ask that they're asking for, then we're going to go into that. And that's one of the things we do actually with our athletes upon meeting with them to begin with. Is one of the questions we ask is, do you know how to get to your Instagram analytics? And I'd say 50-50, we're like, what are you talking about? So we do try to educate them on those. And we also, can run those reports with those to see where the growth patterns are, of making sure that when are they posting? Are they posting at the right time? Because what works internally for our Peyton Baxter brand may not be where their audience lies. So that's where we truly have to go 10 different avenues long to make sure that we are customizing each of their plan of attacks to each athlete to make sure their brand is growing successfully. So whereas Luke may need to post at 6 p.m. at night if he's doing static posts, and his story views seem to be higher when he has a lot of dots, that may not be the same for someone who's not a frequent poster. So Luke does a really good job of doing story posts, but some of our athletes aren't very good at it on original story posts versus repost. So we have to make sure we're looking at those analytics to see if their original content versus their repost content, and which one is driving those numbers up and what time of the day with those numbers driving, and then also what kind of content. We want to make sure when we look at their grid or we look at their Twitter feed, it's not add. It's making sure we have behind the scenes and daily life and personal life mixed in with athletics and what is performing best. So we really try to use those traditional social media analytics to customize their path in driving their numbers up, which drive all the numbers up.
Yeah. And coming, Luke, for you, obviously, Brittany's talking about what you have to do. Can you explain what that looks like? I mean, I don't know if you're allowed to say who you're working with, but what you've been asked, or, what you have to do for your NILs. And then I have a follow-up question for you as well.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of it, people are really interested in kind of day-to-day life. So there are a lot of things in the athletic world that the general public don't really get to see, which is a super unique experience, especially at Tennessee. With local community members, especially being from Knoxville, I guess my platform is a little different because people don't really see inside the facilities or inside the opportunities that I get to take advantage of as a student athlete at Tennessee. So kind of as Brittany was saying, just really taking advantage of what I have to offer is a little bit different. And I see Taylor Tarquin's comment in the chat. I'm not sure if I can talk to that yet, but kind of just like different opportunities for different members of different teams. I feel like for me, that is a big part because I'm not a star basketball player or a star football player, but there's something individualized for me that I'm a bit like able to take advantage of just because on a day-to-day basis, there are still people interested in what I'm doing, even though I'm not stepping on the basketball court or playing on the football field.
Right. Yeah. And you might do something different than football players and basketball players do day to day, right? Like obviously you go to the training room and you go to class, right? But the prep and what it takes to get your mind right and your body right for cheer might be different than football or basketball, and different companies and brands are associated with that. Coming back to you, is there a brand, if you had a dream brand or company that you could work with, who would it be?
You know, I really hate to limit myself by just deciding on one, but Brittany and I sat down and talked about it. Anything that I would be interested in, we really talked a lot about fitness and working out, kind of going that route, just because it's a very broad spectrum of kind of what I'm interested in. So kind of like fitness apparel, fitness items, fitness products, anything of that realm is all of, I really decided what was going to be of best interest to me, kind of whatever I wanted my tailored experience to be, what I was interested in. So I feel like deciding early on kind of the path that I wanted to take for that and being kind of sports, recreation, and product usage is very important to kind of defining your platform and your story.
Yeah, that's so, I think it's so special that student athletes have an opportunity to do this. It's fantastic. Celine, I want to go back to you because I think your role and how you said you work with 20 different Power 5 universities, is that right? And so they came to you came to them, and what were you doing before NIL? What was your role? And then how did it kind of change with these schools? Can you just explain that whole process?
Yeah, good question. So yes, we have 20 clients, and they started, most of them come from people inside the athletic department. So actually our VP of collegiate partnerships used to be at Tennessee. He started the course there with us on the other side at Altius. So most of them are either student athletes, coaches, or administrators, most likely reaching out and saying, hey, we're interested. We've heard that you all are working with schools across the country. What can we hop on a conversation? And every school has a different need. We are in conversations with probably 5 recently, and every single need at one of those schools is totally different. Some are based, there's these donor collectives are out there. Some of them are trying to figure out how to utilize it in recruiting in the right way. Some of them are trying to teach their student athletes how to capitalize. So it's really the schools coming to us and then us having a conversation is this a fit for you? Will it work? Can we help you? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure it's a full partnership. We talk to our schools, Kat and I talk almost every single day of, is this going to work on both sides of it? Before I was at Altius, I was at Women Leaders in College Sports. So working with women administrators across the country on challenges such as this. And I was actually on a call with a bunch of Division I women athletic directors. They were like, how are we going to figure out this new landscape? So I was tasked to finding a company to help our women, and I found Altius. So at that point, it was just Casey and our board of advisors. And so I had a call with him, and I believed in the mission so much that I hopped on board. And that was about a year ago. So that's a little bit of but prior to that, I was on campus.
And do you spend time on campuses now, Celine? Like, what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Every day is different. So yes, I do go to campuses. Probably about once a week, I travel to a campus. So I'll be on one on Thursday this week, meeting with different teams, meeting with coaches. Typically, the simplest way of putting it is meeting with teams, coaches, administrators on overall big picture strategy. What does this look like 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years from now with them? And then sometimes donors and relations of businesses, even how to get involved. This is public information, but LSU had an event 2 weeks ago with 500 businesses there. So part of our role in that was education and how do we make sure that they know what's going on in the landscape, but every day is different. Yesterday, I was on the phone with a women's basketball parent because of the with March Madness coming up. So really, it is every single thing, and every school is a totally different need.
Kat and Brittany, I think this one might be tailored to either of you. So Kat, we'll start with you. Somewhat Blake Hopkins said exploring different career paths in the social media field. And so I know I've been approached at times by people that are saying I can grow your social media account. Do any of these athletes use a person like that or a service like that to help them grow their social media account before they take on NIL or while they take on NIL? And do you think that, there are any specific social media career paths that are related to NIL?
Yes. So I think the cool thing about NIL, flip it from the student athlete perspective, is exactly this group of people you have chatting right here. You're going to see so many careers grow from this. We're not done with the NIL growth. We're not stopping at like one position per school. My position started popping up. I think it's around 20, maybe 30 with a position like mine. I think that grows. I think you see departments, multiple people doing different things. Maybe someone's focused in that social media area. Maybe someone's focused externally. Maybe someone's focused on education. So I definitely think growth is not done. However, I'll always go back to, you need to make sure you're making smart, long-standing decisions, right? That are going to last. As far as growing their social media, we definitely do some of that education, but that's maybe where more, and I'll let Brittany speak to this. In our class though, we hit huge on starting with your brand, right? What are your values, who you are, start there the same way that Brittany does with her clients. But then we bring in social media experts, because let's start with a photo. Your photos have to be good, right? You can't have an ad post that doesn't look good, or a video that there's, noise or people walking around. And that's something that if you're not thinking about, or you don't have someone helping, how do you know how to do that until you dive into it? So that's something we want to hit in that course to help them. But yeah, I mean, the growth in this area is going to be huge. I think social media obviously is not going away anytime soon. It's the only way I get my news, which is probably bad, but we're just going to continue to see that grow. So there's loads of routes this is going to go. Just, I think, keeping up with it and keeping current and understanding what the climate's looking like. And though I said you can't predict, trying to see where it goes is really important in this space. But I'll let Brittany really, I think maybe she can hit to that brand, actual social media building, because I definitely let the experts hit that. My social media is terrible, so.
Yeah, so very much what Kat's saying. I think you're going to see so many jobs, career paths come out of NIL and everything that it is continuing to evolve and build into. It is going to be its own industry. And I think that is something we can 100% predict, is this is going to be an industry of its own with lots of different arms coming out of it. Coming from the influencer industry, I can tell you, and I think that's probably the path a lot of the NIL will take when it comes to other positions within the industry will be, is someone can absolutely help you grow your social media. But if you are not authentic and you are not present, then it doesn't matter what someone tells you to do or all the advice they give you in the world. It's no different than someone giving you a eating plan and going to McDonald's. You can have all the information in the world if you are not going to execute it. And my biggest piece of social media is you have to be authentically yourself. And whoever you decide that's going to be, that's who you have to do. You have to be you. You have to be authentically you. So if, Snickers comes and says, I'm going to pay you $1 million for a commercial and you're allergic to peanuts, you cannot take the deal. You can't do it, because everyone that really knows you knows if you eat a Snickers, you die. So that's a very, very dramatic answer, but that's basically what we tell all of our athletes is if you don't drink, X drink, and they want to offer you a deal, people that really know you don't do that. And if you lose the realness, if you lose the trust, and we talked about trust earlier, and I think there's no difference in that with your social media audience. If you lose that trust, you're done. It doesn't matter how great you are, how many touchdowns you score, or how beautiful you are. If you aren't trustworthy, you can't be trusted to promote anything when it comes to your social media. So a perfect example, I was going to build myself a really pretty backdrop for this tonight. And I said, you know what, Brittany, your number one thing is trust and authenticity. So you see my child's football field and bench press in the background. And that's just, it is what it is. That's really who we are. And if you follow me on social media, you know that's who we are, and that's who I present. And that's my brand. So I didn't want to not, practice what I preach. And I think that's the number one piece of it all. Growing organically on social media is not easy as it once was. And unfortunately, that's just the algorithm of what it is now. You used to be able to gain really quick, really fast, and it's just not quite the same as it once was. So if you lose the authenticity, you're done.
Yeah,
I'm
I think, oh, go ahead, Kat.
So sorry, if you don't, I'm gonna piggyback off that. If you're not a social media person, let's say, I don't want you to think there aren't careers in this. I myself am not. I don't think I've posted in 2 years, so I should not speak to social media, but there's gonna be legal tracks, tax tracks, negotiation tracks. There's so many other tracks as well. So as huge as and I understand the importance of social media, I guess I don't practice it, but I want to say like the prongs of NIL are endless.
Yeah, I
And
think
also
that goes
our
with,
attorney that we have, she really wasn't in the NIL space. We just knew her legal mind. And we brought her into this space essentially because we really respected her in that way. So obviously now she is in the NIL space, whether she wanted to be or not. So I think you're also going to see people being pulled into it from different areas, because if it's not your strength, you need to find someone that it is.
I think one of the big words was trust that I heard from you, Brittany. And so Luke, I want to go to you, especially as we're getting close to ending here. It went by so quickly, but Luke, I remember when NIL was first coming out, I did some ESPN radio stuff and callers were like, this is going to tear teams apart. And then other callers were like, no, this is going to bring teams together. And, then you see quarterbacks buying their offensive line dinner and, teammates, using NIL. Some people think it could be negative. People think it could be positive. From your perspective, how has NIL changed or affected the connection of your cheer team and just campus in general? Like, how have you seen a shift, positive, negative, or just in general? What have you seen it do?
For sure. I mean, I think there's definitely some negative connotations that come along with social media, but at the same time, for me personally, I have to realize that I represent myself, but I also represent Tennessee cheerleading and Tennessee athletics. And so at the end of the day, I have to promote a version of myself that both looks good on me and the organization as a whole. And so I feel like if you go about it in the right way, there's not a way that you can bring others down. And I feel like having a positive platform, having a positive image is only going to add to that culture of success and cheering each other on and really just having each other's backs. And from my experience personally, it's really helped me grow with my teammates. Kenzie Couch is the female cheerleader signed with Bridge Management. And we've both kind of cultivated a relationship of growing together, growing under Bridge. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so excited to, see where the future of this goes and the bigger picture of Tennessee athletics.
Yeah, I think that, for Kat, for Celine, for Brittany to end, what's exciting and what positive effects have you seen this have? You can answer that. Or if there was one thing that you think someone needs to know that wants to get into NIL in the future, what would your advice be? Kat, we'll start with you.
I'm gonna piggyback off Luke. And kind of that last question. I think there was doubters almost when this whole thing started. There's all these people, they'll still say it to me, hey, it's gonna ruin college sports. And then I usually flip back and say, did you watch a college sport this year? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, did it change anything for you? No. I'm like, exactly. So it hasn't ruined anything. It has opened up so many doors for our student athletes. It has taught them so much in a short amount of time. I mean, we're 7 months in, and I have conversations where they've learned so much, they've benefited so much. And then on the flip side, nobody gave them any credit, I think, and they've turned around and gave so much of NIL back in 7 months. The nonprofit work, the charity work, but even, they've given back to them. Maybe they pulled their teammates along with them into a deal or things like that. And I don't think anyone gave our student athletes credit in the beginning that that's where they were going to take this. So all in all, I think it's been 100% a positive thing. We do need to remind them that there's responsibilities that come with these opportunities, and that's huge. And that's where we get to all come in and help them. But I think it's been overwhelmingly positive. I think it's headed in a fantastic direction. And I think it's almost, I don't hear doubters anymore. I don't hear any of that anymore, because I feel like it wasn't administration that silenced it. It was our student athletes' actions that silenced it. So that really, they get all the credit there. As far as the career, my biggest one, whenever you show up to an internship, a volunteer position, anything, show up and really show out, right? Do the job, do it the best you can. That's how you learn. That's how you get the most out of it. You don't know where your job's going to take you. I never, when I first started, thought I was going to end up in a role like this. But you work hard at whatever position you're in, and then opportunities will present themselves, but then you need to show out at that opportunity too. So that's my big one that I tell anyone I talk to is once you can get to that foot in the door, whatever it be, really take advantage of it.
Yeah. Celine, I want to end with you because I think you have the broadest perspective since you work with different universities and different people. So Brittany, for you, any final thoughts on NIL, what's important or the positive effects of it?
I think on a piggyback on Kat is you never know where life's going to take you. I had a very different career prior to managing a full-time social media influencer, and now ended up actually using my sports PR degree at the age of 37 that I'd never actually used in its purest form before. So if you're, 18 years old or 19 years old sitting there going, I don't know what I want to do with my life, well, that's okay. You don't have to know, because it's going to go up and down and around, and the world's going to change. And, when I was in college and sitting in your spot, my current job did not exist. So I couldn't know what I was going to be when I grew up, because what I am didn't exist. So don't pigeonhole yourself into not having all the answers now or later. When Peyton and I launched this business, we didn't have all the answers. I think Celine and Kat have said there are no answers really right now in the path that we're navigating, but we are all in this together. And when it comes down to it, all of our number one goal is to support the athletes. So I think knowing your why that we've talked about before, but also not being stressed to not know exactly where you want to go with it. We get emails all the time saying, I just know I want to work in sports, but I don't know how. I'm like, cool. You want to come, be an intern, do 8 million internships and know where you want to do or where you don't want to do. And that's my biggest piece, I guess, with internships, like kind of piggybacking on what Kat said, is go do as many as you can. I knew what I wanted to do when I was in college, and I did my internship, and I couldn't run out of there fast enough and never, ever, ever get close to that place again. It eliminated what I wanted to do. So I think just be open to where the world will take you.
Nice. Celine, we'll wrap things up with you. What have you seen from the broadest perspective working with 20 universities, and any advice with NIL?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece is just to embrace it, right? Whether you're a student on this call looking for a career, whether you're a student athlete looking for opportunities, whether you're a business that's been hesitant to enter the space, is to embrace this new landscape and to embrace it by answering questions, right? I commend you all for being on this panel and learning more about it, but just continuing to ask Kat questions, ask Brittany, ask me, whatever it is. Embracing this new landscape is the best thing to do, because it's not going anywhere. It's only going to continue to change and evolve, but it's so exciting and it's such an incredible time for everyone involved in college sports.
Luke, I think I can speak for everyone when I say we're so excited for you, everything that is in your future, everything that's coming your way, any of the student athletes on here. I know that as a former student athlete, for all of us that were former student athletes, there might be like 10% that are like, wow, I wish I had that. But there's the other 90% of us are so happy. You don't want things to be hard for the people coming behind you. You want things to be easier for the people coming behind you. And so for me, as a former student athlete at the University of Tennessee, I get so excited for every volunteer, every lady volunteer, and all the opportunities. I'm so thankful to have the four of you. This was phenomenal. I want to thank again the Communication Studies Club of the College of Communication and Information, college that is very close to my heart as a graduate from there. So thank you all for joining, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.